Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Sophomore English. We are in Unit 6. We are studying ancient myths and legends, and I'm with you now on page 1152, 1153 and following. We're going to be working now with the King Arthur motif. Now, in your senior year, you'll be studying again with me the stories of King Arthur from the perspective of Mallory. We're going to look first at King Arthur becomes a king of Britain, the T.H. White offering from the Once and Future King. And then we're going to look at Tennyson's rendition of Arthur. We'll have more to say about that in a little bit. I'm actually starting with you, though, at 2B on page 1153, just to set up our study now. Notice that first we'll begin with legends and legendary heroes. Legends, powerful stories. I'm just reading with you on 1153. Powerful stories about the past that have been handed down for generations. Because they're shared over time, many legends gradually change and form the foundations of other stories. Legends share the following characteristics, at least three. 1. A focus on the life and adventures of legendary heroes or characters who are human yet larger than life. 2. A deep concern with right and wrong. And 3. Support for feelings of national pride. That last one will be significant in our study of Arthur. Legends help shape a people's cultural identity and reflect the values of a community or nation. Now we're going to be comparing worldviews in the reading skill on 1153. A worldview consists of values, beliefs held by a culture. When a writer reveals or retells a legend, the retelling may reflect two worldviews, that of the writer, that of the original tale. To understand a retelling, compare and contrast worldviews. Identify details that indicate characters' beliefs and their reasons for acting or feeling as they do. Then identify details suggesting the writer's attitude. Think about the ways in which these worldviews are alike and different, and finally draw a conclusion about the values and basic beliefs of the different characters and of the writer. What theme or insight about life is revealed. We'll be doing some writing along these lines, so you want to pay attention to this worldview diagram at the bottom of 1153. Of course, we say it often. Let's make sure we're paying attention on 1154 to the vocabulary. Of course, the big question of Unit 6 is, can anyone be a hero? That question is no better placed than our study of King Arthur. Now, we're going to be working with the King Arthur rendition from T.H. White. Put it in your notes. There's no single place where one goes to find all of the stories of King Arthur in antiquity. Of course, Bulfinch and other kinds of writers will attempt to try to bring all of the different strands of the stories together, no doubt. T.H. White's classic, The Once and Future King, is one of the real foundational places that we go to find stories about King Arthur. Let's read a little bit about T.H. White on 1155. Notice your dates, 1906 to 1964. T.H. White is widely known for his tales of Britain's national hero, King Arthur, but he was not born in England. He was born in India when it was still a British colony. White was educated at Cambridge, where he received first-class honors in English. After school, White went to work as a teacher. When his autobiographical work, England Have My Bones, met with success, the 30-year-old White became a full-time writer. The four-part novel, The Once and Future King, of which we're going to read a few lines, a retelling of the King Arthur legends, is White's most famous work. White's version of Arthur legends has inspired movies as well as the musical Camelot from 1960. And the background information for this reading, tales of King Arthur, legendary ruler of Britain, and of the knights of his round table have been retold for centuries. Sir Thomas Mallory, who we'll study in our senior year together, wrote the first English prose version of the legends, Le Morte d'Arthur, in 1470. And Arthur becomes king of Britain, an excerpt from his series, The Once and Future King. T.H. White modernizes Mallory's version of the legends. Now, in this cutting, let's point out that White is really going to give us a certain kind of view of the young author that's far more accessible than, for example, Mallory's. The characters in White's version of the Arthurian story live, breathe, and they even blunder. In fact, in this excerpt from The Once and Future King, it tells how Arthur became king because Sir Kay forgot his sword. We'll read together and enjoy. Now, As good readers, and we are, of course, coming to the end of our sophomore volume, as good readers, we are learning, of course, to scan. And we're just a few days away from being juniors and having to take our ACT for the first time, unless, of course, you decide to take it in your sophomore year. And what is it that good ACT takers do? Well, they scan a reading passage, or any passage of the ACT, to see where it is they're headed. So I'm hoping that you scanned it. You've seen it's a number of pages. We're going to read this one together. We're going to work at level 1 and level 2A and 2B. But primarily what we'll do is we'll read a certain part of the passage together. Then we'll pause and we'll make some observations at level 1. Allow me to kind of, in some ways, maybe model good reading habits for you. Let's go to work now. I'm with you on 1157. King Pellinore arrived for the important weekend in high state of flurry. "I say," he exclaimed, "do you know? Have you heard? Is it a secret?" "What? Is what a secret? What?" they asked him. "Why, the king," cried his majesty. "You know about the king?" "What's the matter with the king?" inquired Sir Ector. "You don't say he's coming down to hunt with those darned hounds of his or anything like that?" "He's dead," cried King Pellinore tragically. "He's dead, poor fella, and can't hunt anymore." Sir Gurmore stood up respectfully and took off his cap of maintenance. "The king is dead," he said. "Long live the king." Everybody else felt they ought to stand up too, and the boy's nurses burst into tears. "There, there," she sobbed. "His loyal highness, dead and gone, and him with such a respectable gentleman. Many's the illuminated picture I've cut out of him, from the illustrated missals, aye, and struck up over the mantle, from the time when he was in swaddling bands, right through them world towers, till he was a-visiting the dispersed areas as the world's Prince Charming. There wasn't a picture of him, but I had it out, aye, and gave him the last of thoughts of nights." "Compose yourself, Nanny," said Sir Ector. It is solemn, isn't it?" said King Pellinore. "What? Uther the Conqueror, 1066 to 1216. And now on 1158. "A solemn moment," said Sir Gurmore. "The king is dead. Long live the king." "We ought to pull down the curtains," said Kay, who was always a stickler for good form, "or half-mast the banners." "That's right," said Sir Ector. Somebody go and tell the sergeant-at-arms." It was obviously the Warwick's duty to execute this command, for he was now the junior nobleman present, so he ran out cheerfully to find the sergeant. Soon there were those who were left in the solar could hear a voice crying out, "Nay then, 1-2, special warning for its late majesty. Lower on the command, 2, and then the flapping of all the standards, banners, pinions, banrolls, gurdians, steamers, with which the gay snowy turrets of the forest sauvage. How did you hear?" asked Sir Ector. "I was pricking through the purlieus of the forest after that beast, you know, when I met with a solemn friar of orders, Grey, and he told me, 'It's the very latest news.'" "Poor old Pendragon," said Sir Ector. "The king is dead," Sir Gurmore solemnly. "Long live the king." "It's all very well for you to keep on mentioning that, my dear Gurmore," exclaimed King Pellinore petulantly. "But who is this king? What? That is to live so long. What, according to you?" "Well, his heir," said Sir Gurmore, rather taken aback. "Our blessed monarch," said the nurse tearfully, "never had no heir. Anybody that studied the loyal family know that. "Good gracious," exclaimed Sir Ector, "but he must have had next of kin." "That's just it," cried King Pellinore in high excitement. "That's the exciting part of it. What? No heir and no next of kin, and who's to succeed to the throne? That's what my friar was so excited about. What? And why he was asking who could succeed to what. What? What?" "Do you mean to tell me," exclaimed Sir Gurmore indignantly, "that there ain't no king of Grandmire?" "Not a scrap of one," cried King Pellinore, feeling important. "And there have been signs and wonders of no mean mind." "I think it's a scandal," said Sir Gurmore. "God knows what the dear old country is coming to, due to these lollards and communists, no doubt." Now let's pause for a moment. Notice the mentioning of the word communist here by White is going to inject a bit of the more modern of this study of Arthur. Let's put it in our notes at level 1 right away. The opening of our story here is 2 things. 1, The king, the most recent king, has now died, leaving to the kingdom without a king to rule over all. This, of course, now is the question of who was the heir of Uther Pendragon. I'm on page 1159. What sort of signs and wonders, asked Sir Ector. Well, there has appeared a sort of sword in a stone. What, in a sort of a church? Not in the church, if you see what I mean, and not in the stone, but that sort of thing. What, like you might say? I don't know what the church is coming to, said Sir Gurmore. It's in an anvil, exclaimed the king. The church? Notice the ironies, the humor and the ironies. The church in an anvil? No, the sword. But I thought you said the sword was in the stone. No, said King Pellamore. The stone is outside the church. Look here, Pellamore, said Sir Ector. You have a bit of rest, old boy, and start again. Here, drink up this horn of mead and take it easy. The sword, said King Pellamore, is stuck through an anvil which stands on a stone. It goes right through the anvil and into the stone. The anvil is stuck to the stone stands outside a church. Give me some more mead. Now, of course, this is the famous sword in the stone story. If you know anything about King Arthur, you know about the fact that the young boy will draw a sword from the stone, in this version of the story, stuck through an anvil. I don't think that's much of a wonder, remarked Sir Gurmore. But what I wonder at is that they should allow such things to happen. But you can't tell nowadays, what with these Saxon agitators. My dear fellow, cried Pellinore, getting excited again, it's not where the stone is, what, that I'm telling to you, but what is written on it. What? Where it is. What? Why, on its pommel. Come on, Pellinore, said Sir Ector. You just sit quiet still with your face to the wall for a minute, and then tell us what you're talking about. Take it easy, old boy. No need for hurry. You sit still and look at the wall. There's a good chap. And talk as slow as you can. There are words written on this sword. We're going to know the sword is the sword Excalibur from other traditions. Written on this sword in the stone outside this church, cried King Pellinore piteously. And these words are as follows. Oh, do not try to listen, you two, instead of interrupting all the time about nothing, for it makes a man's head go ever so. What are these words? asked Kay. These words say this, said King Pellinore. As far as I can understand them, that old friar of yours, of Orders Grey. Go on, do, said Kay, for the king had come to a halt. I'm on page 1160. Go on, said Sir Ector. What do these words on this sword and this anvil and this stone outside the church say? Some red propaganda, no doubt, remarked Sir Gurmore. Now, again, this red propaganda, this has to do, of course, with the Red Scare of the 20th century. Obviously, White is playing around here to some degree, and made readers then of his rendition of Arthur even more attracted to the story. King Pellinore closed his eyes tight, extended his arms in both directions, and announced in capital letters, Whoso pulleth out this sword of the stone and anvil is rightwise king, born of all England. Who said that? asked Sir Gurmore. But the sword said it, like I tell you. Talking of weapon, remarked Sir Gurmore skeptically. It was written on it, cried the king angrily, written on it in letters of gold. Why didn't you put it out there? Why didn't you pull it out then? asked Sir Gurmore. But I tell you that I wasn't there. All this that I'm telling you was told to me by that friar I was telling you of, like I told you. Has this sword with this inscription been pulled out? Inquired Sir Ector. No, whispered King Pellinore dramatically. That's where the whole excitement comes in. They can't pull this sword out at all, although they have all been trying like fun. So they have had to proclaim a tournament all over England for New Year's Day, so that the man who comes to the tournament and pulls out the sword can be king of all England forever. What I say? Now, this of course sets it up. Let's put it in our notes at level 1. The opening of our reading and the beginning of the story of King Arthur begins actually not with King Arthur at all, but with a mysterious sword in an anvil, in a stone, outside of a church, with an inscription that says, whoever can pull the sword from the stone becomes king of all England. We will, of course, know in our reading of this text that that young man will in fact be Arthur and none other, because Arthur is of course a child of King Uther, raised, however, not by King Uther at all. "Oh, father," now I'm with you on 1160. "Oh, father," cried Kay, "the man who pulls the sword out of the stone will be the King of England. Can't we go to the tournament, father, and have a shot?" "Couldn't think of it," said Sir Ector. "Long way to London," said Sir Gurmore, shaking his head. "My father went there once," said King Pellinore. Kay said, "Oh, surely we could go? When I am knighted, I shall have to go to the tournament somewhere, and this one happens at just the right date. All the best people will be there, and we should see the famous knights and great kings. It does not matter about the sword, of course, but think of the tournament, probably the greatest there ever has been in Graymer, and all the things we should see and do. Dear father, let me go to this tourney, if you love me, so that I may bear away the prize of all in my maiden fight." In other words, Kay asks his father, "Can I go and fight at the tournament?" Of course, in the back of his mind, he's hoping that he can pull the sword from the stone. "But Kay," said Sir Ector, "I have never been to London." "All the more reason to go. I believe that anybody who does not go for a tournament like this will be proving that he has no noble blood in his veins. Think what people will say about us if we do not go and have a shot at that sword. They will say that Sir Ector's family was too vulgar and knew it had no chance." Notice the son is able to kind of use family pride then to anticipate being allowed to go in this on this trip to London, to this tournament, with the possibility, obviously, of pulling the sword from the stone. I'm on 1161. "We all know the family has no chance," said Sir Ector, "that is, for the sword." "A lot of people in London," remarked Sir Gamore, with a wild surmise. "So they say." He took a deep breath and googled at his host with eyes like marbles. "And shops," added King Pellinore suddenly, also beginning to breathe heavily. "Dang it," cried Sir Ector, bumping his horn mug on the table so that it spilled. "Let's all go to London then and see the new king." They rose up as one man. "Why shouldn't I be as good a man as my father?" exclaimed King Pellinore. "Dash it all," cried Sir Gamore, "after all, it is the capital." "Hurrah!" shouted Kay. "Lord have mercy," said the nurse. Notice why Abel, through his use of dialogue, to create a bit of tension here, put that in 2b. This is going to give the story a little bit of dynamism for us. At this moment, the wart came in with Merlin, and everybody was too excited to notice that if he had not been grown up now, he would have been on the verge of tears. "Oh, wart!" cried Kay, forgetting for the moment that he was only addressing his squire and slipping back into the familiarity of their boyhood. "What do you think? We're all going to London for a great tournament on New Year's Day." "Are we?" "Yes, and you will carry my shield and spears for the jousts, and I shall win the palm of everyone and be a great knight." "Well, I'm glad we are going," said the wolf, "for Merlin is leaving us too." "Oh, we shan't need Merlin." "He is leaving us," repeated the wolf. "Leaving us?" asked Sir Ector. "I thought it was we that were leaving." "He is going away from the Forest Sauvage." Sir Ector said, "Come now, Merlin, what's all this about? I don't understand all this a bit." Now, of course, I'm on 1162 now. Now, of course, Merlin is going to be a very important player in the story of King Arthur. It will be Merlin who, in large measure, will be responsible for raising the wart, which ultimately will be young Arthur. By the way, do you see on 1162 the little box here for tournaments, history connection? The first tournaments were held in France in the 1100s. Groups of knights would split into two sides and fight each other. Death and injury often resulted. In the 1200s, the real battles were replaced with mock ones called jousts. In a joust, two horsemen would charge at each other with blunt weapons. Each would try to knock the other from his horse. Jousting tournaments were social gatherings attended by ladies and common people as well as by knights. Now we'll have, at the top of 1162, the story continued. "I have come to say goodbye, Sir Ector," said the old magician. "Tomorrow, my pupil Kay will be knighted, and the next week my other pupil will go away as his squire. I've outlived my usefulness here, and it is time to go." Now, don't say that," said Sir Ector. "I think you're a jolly useful chap. Whatever happens, you just stay and teach me, or be the librarian or something. Don't you leave an old man alone after the children have flown." "We shall all meet again," said Merlin. He's always doing this, right, making these prophecies. "There is no cause to be sad." "Don't go," said Kay. "I must go," replied the tutor. "We have had a good time while we were young, but it is in the nature of time to fly. There are many things in other parts of the kingdom which I ought to be attending to just now, and it's especially busy time for me. Come, Archimenides," his talking owl that Merlin has, Say goodbye to the company. Goodbye, said Archimedes tenderly to the work. Goodbye, said the work, without looking up at all. But you can't go, cried Sir Ector, not without a month's notice. Can't I? Replied Merlin, taking up the position always used by philosophers who propose to dematerialize. He stood on his toes while Archimedes, held tight to his shoulder, began to spin on him slowly like a top, spun faster and faster, till he was only a blur of grayish light, and in a few seconds there was no one there at all. Goodbye, Wart, cried the two faint voices outside the solar window. Goodbye, said the work for the last time, and the poor fellow went quickly out of the room. So Merlin, who has been the tutor to both Kay and as well as young Arthur, now will leave, obviously setting up now the tension of what's to happen in London. The knighting took place in a whirl of preparations. Kay's sumptuous bath had to be set up in a box room between the two trail houses, in an old box of selected games which contained a worn-out straw dartboard. It was called flashity in those days because all the other rooms were full of packing. The nurse spent the whole time constructing new worn pants for everybody on the principle that the climate of any place outside the Forest Sauvage must be treacherous to the extreme. And as for the sergeant, he polished all the armor till it was quite brittle and sharpened the swords till they were almost worn away. In other words, everyone's getting ready now for the tournament. 1163. At last, it was time to set out. Perhaps if you happen not to have lived in the old England of the 12th century, or whenever it was, and in a remote castle on the borders of the marshes at that, you will find it difficult to imagine the wonders of their journey. The road or track, and again, obviously, we could put it in our notes. This is another rendition of the famous journey motif, no doubt, of Odysseus. The road or track ran most of the time along the high ridges of the hills or downs, and they could look down on either side of them upon the desolate marshes where the snowy reeds sighed and the ice cracked and the duck in the red sunsets quacked loud on the wintry air. The whole country was like that. Perhaps there would be a mooring marsh on one side of the ridge and a forest of 100,000 acres on the other, and all the great branches waved in white. They could sometimes